The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and at the center of it all stood a man who thought no one could touch him. Mayor Charles Denton, the so-called savior of the city. He adjusted his cufflinks with a smirk and looked up at the bench. "Let's make this quick, Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping arrogance. "Some of us actually have cities to run." The judge leaned back, calm but unreadable. "Then I suggest, Mr. Mayor," he said quietly, "you listen closely. Because after today, you might not be running anything at all." The audience gasped. Denton's smirk faltered. "Before we continue, if you believe no one is above the law, make sure to subscribe and join us here on Sweet Justice, where real emotions meet powerful courtroom stories every week." The bailiff called for order and the cameras fell silent. The judge continued, voice steady as steel. "You stand accused of diverting public funds, money meant for the poor, the elderly, and the displaced. You claim it's all a misunderstanding." Denton chuckled, shaking his head. "Your Honor, I've done more for this city than any of your verdicts ever could." "This whole thing is being recorded," the judge interrupted, "so I'd choose your next words carefully." For the first time, Denton's confidence wavered. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he brushed it off. "Please," he scoffed. "There's no evidence." The judge tapped his gavel once, then nodded to the clerk. "Play the audio." A faint hiss filled the speakers, and then a voice. The mayor's voice, saying words that would change everything. The courtroom seemed to shrink as the mayor's own voice echoed through the speakers. "Move the funds from the housing project to the event committee. We'll call it public outreach, make it look clean. Those people don't need new homes. They need to vote." Gasps rippled across the gallery. One of the reporters dropped her pen. The mayor froze, his confident smirk melting into disbelief. "Turn that off," Denton barked, slamming his hand on the defense table. "This is taken out of context." Judge Caprio's gaze hardened. "Context, Mr. Mayor, doesn't change the truth." The defense attorney rose quickly, trying to regain control. "Your Honor, this so-called recording is unverified. It could be fabricated." But the judge's eyes turned toward the witness stand, where a woman sat clutching a small black recorder in her hands. Angela Carter, a soft-spoken city clerk who had risked everything to expose the truth. "Miss Carter," the judge said gently, "please confirm for the record. Did you personally record that conversation?" She nodded, her hands trembling. "Yes, Your Honor, I worked in the mayor's office. I was the assistant finance auditor. When I saw the transactions being redirected, I couldn't stay silent anymore." Angela's eyes darted toward the mayor, who was glaring daggers at her. "He told me if I ever spoke about it, I'd lose my job. He said no one would believe me." The judge leaned forward, voice low but firm. "Miss Carter, you did the right thing. This court believes you." A wave of murmurs filled the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously and cameras focused on the mayor's paling face. Mayor Denton whispered harshly to his lawyer, "Get her charged for illegal recording. Do something." His lawyer swallowed hard. "Sir, that won't work. She recorded on government property. It's admissible." The mayor's jaw tightened, then stalled by time. "I don't care how." But time was no longer his ally. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses, eyes locked on the mayor. "Mr. Denton, for years you've stood behind podiums promising integrity and service to this city. Yet here we are, listening to proof of your betrayal." "I object," the lawyer shouted, standing. "Overruled," Caprio thundered. "And if you interrupt again, I'll hold you in contempt." The courtroom fell silent. Angela's courage had cracked open the mayor's armor. And for the first time, the people could see the man behind the charm and speeches. The judge turned back to Angela. "You said there were more recordings?" She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I brought everything." She reached into her folder and produced 3 additional tapes, each labeled by date. Each one contains meetings about the diverted funds for schools, shelters, and the city hospital project. The judge accepted them from the bailiff, his expression unreadable. "The court will review these in full. But for now," he turned to the mayor, "you will answer a simple question." The mayor stared back, silent. "Did you or did you not authorize the movement of $2.3 million from the housing development budget into private event accounts under your office?" Denton straightened, forcing a smirk. "Your Honor, I don't handle every transaction personally. I staff—" "Answer the question," Caprio cut in sharply. Denton hesitated. May have signed off, but only after review. So you admit authorization? The lawyer jumped up again. Your Honor, my client's words are being twisted. Sit down, counselor. The judge snapped. The courtroom vibrated with tension. Caprio looked at the mayor again, this time not with anger, but disappointment. Do you know how many families waited for those funds? How many elderly citizens were counting on that housing project? You didn't just steal money, Mr. Denton. You stole trust. The mayor scoffed quietly. Spare me the sermon, Judge. You think one recording changes anything? You're dealing with politics now, not justice. The judge leaned forward slowly, his tone chillingly calm. Oh, I'm well aware. But in my courtroom, justice is the only politics that matters. And with that, he raised his gavel and declared, We'll proceed to evidence review. Court in recess for 10 minutes. The sound of the gavel cracked like thunder. The mayor sat motionless, but beneath the surface, his world was unraveling. His lawyer whispered frantically. Angela sighed in relief, but clutched her recorder tightly, as if it was the only thing protecting her. Judge Caprio stood, hands on the bench, staring down at the man who once believed himself untouchable. And he knew the real trial was only just beginning. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as Judge Caprio returned from recess. The journalists had doubled. Cameras were rolling, microphones pointed toward the bench. The world outside was catching fire with headlines. Mayor under fire, secret tapes leak in courtroom. But inside that wood-paneled chamber, silence fell the moment the judge entered. Court is back in session, Caprio said firmly, taking his seat. We'll now review the second piece of evidence submitted by Miss Carter. Angela stood again, voice steady but eyes tired. Your Honor, this one was recorded 2 weeks after the first tape. It's about what the mayor called the cleanup operation. The mayor's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, I must protest. These tapes are unverified and clearly— Counselor, Caprio interrupted, not even looking up. Sit down. The lawyer froze, then reluctantly obeyed. The bailiff pressed play. At first it was muffled conversation. Then the mayor's unmistakable voice filled the air again, colder this time. No one can trace this to us. The inspector who found the missing funds is a problem. Take care of it. Make it look like a car accident. Understand? But sir, another voice began. Do it or I'll find someone who will. The courtroom erupted. Shouts, gasps, whispers, all clashing into chaos. The bailiff had to call for order, pounding the floor with his baton. The mayor's face turned ashen. He slammed his fist on the table. That's a lie. Fabrication. I never— Judge Caprio's voice boomed. Enough. The echo of his shout froze everyone in place. He removed his glasses slowly and looked straight at the mayor. You ordered a cover-up of an inspector's death? The mayor shook his head violently. No, that's not what— Then explain the tape. It was edited. Angela spoke quietly from the stand. Your Honor, the inspector's name was David Holloway. He was investigating the housing fund when he died. His car lost control near the old bridge, but when I checked his reports, he had listed the mayor's office as a source of obstruction. After that, his files disappeared. The judge stared at her. Do you have proof of this? She nodded. Yes, sir. The night before he died, he emailed me. I printed it. She handed the paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the bench. Judge Caprio read silently. The courtroom held its breath. Angela, I think I found where the money went. If anything happens to me, check the mayor's event accounts. David. The judge exhaled deeply and set the paper down. His voice was heavy. So, Mr. Mayor, your inspector dies right after discovering your fraud. Convenient timing, isn't it? The mayor's face twitched. You can't prove anything. Caprio leaned forward. Maybe not yet, but I'm starting to believe this court will see justice served, no matter how deep your pockets go. A silence followed, sharp and suffocating. Angela looked down, tears glimmering. He was a good man, Your Honor. He believed in the city. The judge's jaw clenched. And you do too, Miss Carter. That's why you're here. Then turning to the mayor. And you betrayed everything public service stands for. The mayor finally snapped. Don't lecture me, old man. You sit up there pretending you're above it all. But you don't run this city. I do, a collective gasp. Even his lawyer buried his face in his hands. Judge Caprio's tone dropped an octave. You just made a big mistake, Mr. Denton. The mayor laughed mockingly. Oh, please, what are you going to do? Slap me with contempt? I'll have you replaced before lunch. That was the moment the temperature in the room shifted. The judge's eyes hardened, not with rage but resolve. Bailiff, he said calmly, secure the defendant's phone and laptop immediately. No communications in or out, the mayor shot up. You can't. I can, Caprio said coldly. And I just did. The bailiff stepped forward as the mayor backed away. Touch me and I'll be arrested for obstruction, the judge finished. The entire courtroom watched as the mayor, once untouchable, was cornered like any other criminal. Caprio leaned slightly forward on the bench. You're not above the law, Mr. Denton, not in my courtroom. The mayor's glare could have burned holes through steel. You'll regret this. The judge didn't blink. The only thing I regret is that it took this long for your lies to reach my bench. Silence again. The words hung heavy in the air. Then the judge turned to Angela. Miss Carter, I'll need those final 2 recordings. Yes, Your Honor, she whispered. As the court adjourned again, Angela looked over her shoulder. The mayor was still staring at her, but now his expression wasn't arrogance. It was fear, because deep down he knew the walls were closing in, and for Judge Caprio, this wasn't just another case. It was personal. The next morning, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Every seat filled, cameras humming, the air thick with tension and something else, anticipation. When Judge Caprio entered, even the murmurs outside faded. He wasn't just presiding today. He was delivering judgment on years of deception. Court is now in session, he declared, adjusting his robe. Miss Carter, please proceed. Angela stood, her hands trembling slightly as she held up a flash drive. Your Honor, this is the last recording David Holloway made before his death. It's dated 1 day before the accident. She passed it to the bailiff, who connected it to the courtroom audio system. For a few seconds there was only static. Then voices again. This time it wasn't just the mayor. There was another man, confident, smug, a police captain. You'll get your share, Captain. Just keep the reports buried. And the inspector? He won't be around to bother us. Trust me. What about the girl, Angela Carter? We'll deal with her too when the time comes. Angela covered her mouth. The audience gasped in horror. Judge Caprio leaned forward, face pale but composed. Miss Carter, he said softly, you were next. Angela nodded, tears falling freely. Yes, Your Honor. That's why I left the department and went into hiding. But when I saw the city falling apart, when people started losing their homes because of his corruption, I couldn't stay silent anymore. The mayor sat frozen, every trace of arrogance gone. His lawyer whispered, We can request a recess, but the mayor slammed his hand down. For what? It's over anyway. Judge Caprio's gaze turned toward him. I'm glad you understand, Mr. Denton, because this court finally does too. He rose from his chair. Mr. Mayor, you used your power to silence truth, to bury good men, and to profit from the suffering of citizens who trusted you. And when you were caught, you tried to intimidate the very people who sought justice. The mayor tried to speak, but his voice failed him. The judge continued, each word deliberate, cutting through the courtroom like thunder. You once told this court you ran this city. You were wrong. The law runs this city, and as long as I sit in this chair, justice will not be bought, bullied, or buried. Reporters scribbled frantically. Some even stopped writing and just listened. It wasn't just a verdict anymore. It was a message to every corrupt official in the country. The mayor's head dropped, shame replacing fury. Judge Caprio turned to the bailiff. Officer, take Mr. Denton into custody pending sentencing for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and misuse of public office. The bailiff stepped forward. Handcuffs clicked. The mayor didn't resist. He just whispered, You have no idea what you've started. Caprio looked at him one last time. Oh, I know exactly what I've started, he said quietly. A reminder that no one is above the law. Angela watched silently as the man who had ruined so many lives was led away. When the doors closed behind him, she looked up at the judge. Thank you, Your Honor, she whispered. He nodded, his expression softening. No, Miss Carter. Thank you. You didn't just bring justice to this courtroom. You brought back hope to this city. The gavel came down one final time. Court is adjourned. The mayor is seen being escorted through the courthouse hallway. Flashes of cameras, reporters shouting his name. Inside the empty courtroom, Judge Caprio sits alone for a moment, staring at the bench, the symbol of everything he stood for. He finally removes his glasses, whispering to himself, "For every truth they tried to bury, there will always be someone brave enough to dig it back up." 2 weeks later, the courtroom was quiet again. No cameras, no reporters, just a handful of people, the ones who truly cared about what justice meant, not what it looked like. Judge Caprio entered slowly, his face solemn but calm. This wasn't just another case to close. It was a wound to heal. At the front sat Angela Carter, wearing her late husband's badge pinned to her jacket. Beside her was an empty chair, a quiet tribute to Inspector David Holloway, whose truth had finally been heard. The clerk stood. The State versus Charles Denton. Sentencing. The bailiff opened the side door and the once proud mayor was escorted in, wrists cuffed. Gone were the polished shoes and designer suit. Now he wore a plain gray uniform. His head was bowed, the arrogance long gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who'd finally seen his own reflection. Judge Caprio began, his voice steady. "Mr. Denton, in my years on this bench, I've seen thieves, liars, and men who've lost their way. But you, sir, represent something far worse, the betrayal of trust. The people who elected you believed you were serving them. Instead, you served yourself." He paused, letting the silence breathe. The courtroom was still. "Justice," he continued, "is not about revenge. It's about responsibility, and today this court holds you fully responsible." He lifted a document from the bench. "For misuse of public funds, conspiracy, and perjury, I hereby sentence you to 12 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole for the first 6. The mayor closed his eyes. A single tear fell, though no one knew if it was for guilt or regret. Angela watched silently, her hands gripping her husband's badge. But then Judge Caprio looked toward her. "Miss Carter, please rise." She stood, surprised. "This court acknowledges your courage, not only for uncovering the truth, but for restoring faith in a system that others tried to corrupt. On behalf of the court and this city, I extend our gratitude." He nodded to the bailiff, who brought forward a small wooden plaque. It read, "In honor of Inspector David Holloway, for courage beyond duty, may justice remember his name." Angela covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The entire courtroom stood in quiet respect. Even the bailiffs bowed their heads. Judge Caprio's voice softened. "There's one more thing I must say," he added. "Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, in the bravery of a single soul who chooses truth over silence." He picked up his gavel and gave one final strike. "Court is adjourned." The gray sky began to clear as Angela stepped out into the sunlight, clutching her husband's plaque. For the first time in years, she smiled. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been redeemed. Inside the courtroom, Judge Caprio remained seated, staring at the empty witness stand where so many had lied, cried, and confessed. He whispered to himself, "Power may silence truth for a while, but truth always finds its voice." The camera pans to the judge's gavel resting on the bench, a symbol of hope, justice, and courage, before fading to black.